Kindly remove your aged hands from the countertop, Grandma. Individuals like you do not depart from here with $4,000 in currency. Officer Brent Maddox did not even attempt to conceal his smirk as he seized Evelyn Bird's identification from her wavering fingers, lifting it with a pair of gloved pinches as if it harbored a contagion. You ought to have retained your modest Social Security disbursement and remained silent, propelling her toward the exit while patrons gawked. Now you shall ascertain the consequences when people of your sort feign solvency. Evelyn did not divert her gaze from the pavement outside, where a phalanx of stout boots, leather jerkins, and full-face helmets had already swiveled toward the glazed portals, observing every second Maddox's grip tightened on her forearm. He had not yet discerned that he was not the solitary observer of her predicament. Before we proceed further, share your global vantage point from which you are observing and ensure you subscribe, because tomorrow's narrative is one you will not wish to miss. The morning sun gently warmed Evelyn Bird's countenance as she alighted from the conveyance in front of Stonebrook Federal Bank. Her arthritic condition was resurfacing, rendering each step with her walking stick a minor ordeal. Nevertheless, the prospect of her granddaughter's radiant smile spurred her onward. "Nearly there," she murmured to herself, cradling the folder containing scholarship documentation against her person as if it were a treasured possession. The bank's glass entryways parted smoothly, ushering her into the ambient coolness of the air conditioning. Friday mornings typically bustled with activity, and this day was no exception. A queue of patrons extended from the teller's windows. Evelyn assumed her position at the rear. "Next patron, please," announced a young gentleman attired in a spotless white shirt bearing a name tag inscribed with Ryan Keller. Evelyn stepped forward, bestowing a cordial smile. "Good morning, young man." Ryan Keller offered no reciprocal smile. His gaze flickered about, never truly engaging hers. He appeared freshly graduated, with hands that had yet to acquire the assurance of seasoned experience. "How may I assist you?" he inquired, his voice pitched slightly higher than its natural register. "I would like to make a withdrawal, if you please." Evelyn placed her folder down and began to open it. $4,000 for my granddaughter's college accommodation deposit. The deadline is Monday. Ryan's eyebrows ascended. "That is a rather substantial sum of currency." "Indeed it is," Evelyn concurred amiably, "though my university mandates the housing deposit be rendered in cash or via money order. I have been accumulating funds for this occasion since her birth." "I will require to see some identification," Ryan stated, his tone subtly altering. "Certainly." Evelyn reached for her handbag, her digits stiff and uncooperative. She fumbled with the clasp, feeling an inexplicable unease under his scrutinizing gaze. Her handbag contained numerous items: prescription containers, tissues, receipts, and hard candies encased in crinkling cellophane. "Kindly bear with me a moment. It is in here somewhere." Ryan's posture stiffened. He cast a glance towards his manager's office, then back at Evelyn's searching hands. "Is there an issue?" she inquired, finally locating her wallet beneath a packet of tissues. "No, no issue whatsoever," Ryan affirmed swiftly, too swiftly. Evelyn produced her driver's license and bank card, sliding them across the counter. "Here you are." Ryan retrieved her identification, scrutinizing it for an extended duration, seemingly beyond necessity. He then inputted something into his computer, his brow furrowed at the screen. "One moment, Mrs. Bird. I must verify something with my manager." Before Evelyn could voice a response, Ryan was proceeding briskly towards a glass-enclosed office where a man in a costly suit was engrossed in reviewing documents. Frank Dillard. She had encountered him previously, but had never received his personal assistance. He was one of those individuals who seemed to perceive through people rather than directly at them. Through the glass pane, she observed their exchange. Ryan leaned in, speaking in a low tone, yet gesturing back in her direction. Frank Dillard looked up past Ryan, his gaze settling directly upon Evelyn. There was an element in that look that caused her stomach to constrict. Not surprise or compassion, but something more frigid, something she had witnessed on numerous occasions throughout her 74 years. Frank rose, adjusting his tie, and followed Ryan back to the counter. "Mrs. Bird," he stated, omitting the courtesy of extending his hand. His voice carried throughout the bank's lobby. "You are attempting to withdraw $4,000 in cash." Evelyn noted the turning heads. She maintained her voice low and dignified. "Yes, a deposit." "And for what precise reason would individuals such as yourself require such a sum at once?" Frank inquired, making no effort to lower his voice. The words landed like an insult. Individuals such as yourself. She comprehended his implication precisely. "My granddaughter's university mandates it." Indeed, Frank interrupted her, waving a dismissive hand. "Ryan will assist you in verifying your account. We have established procedures for substantial cash transactions." Frank turned away, and Ryan stepped forward once more, his gaze not quite meeting hers. "I will simply need to conduct some additional verification on your account, Mrs. Bird. It should not take long." However, rather than engaging with his computer, Ryan stepped aside towards the rear section behind the teller stations. She observed him retrieve a telephone, turning his back to her. Evelyn stood solitary at the counter, her grip tight on the folder containing her granddaughter's future. The discomfort in her legs receded into the background, supplanted by a familiar sensation of being rendered invisible. She had toiled her entire existence, 32 years, serving meals in the school cafeteria, volunteering at church every Sunday, raising her children, and assisting with her grandchildren. Now, at 74 years of age, she was being treated as a delinquent for endeavoring to access her own funds. She surveyed the bank. Other patrons were being attended to. A young Caucasian couple shared laughter with their teller as they deposited a check. An elderly Caucasian gentleman in a business suit was escorted to the loan officer's office, a cup of coffee in his hand. And here she remained, waiting as she had on so many prior occasions. Through the expansive front windows, she perceived movement in the parking lot. 2 patrol cars arrived, their lights extinguished, but positioned directly before the entrance. Her heart fluttered. Surely they were not here for her. Yet, deep down, she sensed that something was amiss. Terribly amiss. Frank emerged from his office once more, glancing towards the front entrance with an expression that seemed almost one of satisfaction. Ryan remained in the rear, no longer even feigning to process her transaction. Evelyn stood completely motionless, her knuckles white around the handle of her cane. She had committed no transgression. The funds were hers, meticulously saved dollar by dollar over many years. All the documentation was in order. Her identification was valid. Yet, none of that appeared to hold significance as the 2 police officers pushed through the front doors, their hands resting casually on their belts near their sidearms. The bank fell into a profound silence as the officers scanned the room, their eyes swiftly locating Frank Dillard, who offered a slight nod in Evelyn's direction. She longed to speak, to elucidate, to present her folder containing all the scholarship papers and the correspondence from the university regarding the housing deposit. But her mouth had become parched, and that old, familiar sensation washed over her. The one that apprised her that vocalizing her concerns would only exacerbate the situation. So she remained standing there, a 74-year-old grandmother afflicted with arthritis and a lifetime of arduous labor behind her, awaiting the unfolding events, entirely unaware that outside in the parking lot, a contingent of individuals clad in leather vests had just arrived on their resonating motorcycles, making their way towards the automated teller machine situated on the side of the establishment. The glass doors of Stonebrook Federal Bank swung open with a rush as officers Brent Maddox and Cliff Harland strode inward. Maddox led the advance, his broad shoulders squared and his jaw set firmly. Harland followed 2 paces behind, mirroring his partner's confident bearing, though lacking the innate swagger. "Which one?" Maddox inquired, surveying the bank. Frank Dillard stepped forward, subtly indicating Evelyn with a slight nod. "That is she, officers." Evelyn felt her heart pounding against her ribs as the 2 Caucasian officers approached. The taller one, Officer Maddox, as per his nameplate, possessed piercing blue eyes that seemed to penetrate through her rather than observe her directly. The shorter one, Officer Harlan, continually glanced around at the other patrons as if embarrassed to be present. "Ma'am," Maddox stated, his voice amplified sufficiently for all to apprehend. "We have received a report concerning suspicious activity. What precisely are you engaged in here today?" Evelyn straightened her spine, overriding the discomfort. "I am merely making a withdrawal from my account, officer." "For your granddaughters?" "A withdrawal of what amount?" Maddox interjected, drawing nearer. $4,000, Evelyn replied, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "It is a deposit. I have all the necessary paperwork right here." She gestured towards the folder on the counter. Maddox did not even glance at it. $4,000 in currency. And from where did someone of your ilk acquire such a sum? The insult stung, but Evelyn had endured worse. "It is my money, officer. I have been saving it for many years. I worked at Westfield Elementary School cafeteria for 32 years. "Allow me to examine that identification once more," Maddox demanded, interrupting her yet again. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she extended her driver's license. Instead of accepting it gently, Maddox snatched it from her grasp. "Harlan, take a look at this," he commanded, holding the ID aloft. "It does not appear authentic to me." Officer Harlan peered at the license and shrugged. "It could be counterfeit," he offered hesitantly, clearly deferring to his partner. "It most certainly is not counterfeit," Evelyn protested, her voice escalating slightly. "I have been a patron at this establishment for over 40 years. Behind the officers, Frank Dillard stood with his arms crossed, a look of smug satisfaction on his face. He made no move to corroborate Evelyn's identity, despite the fact that she had often seen him offer her a nod of greeting within the bank on numerous prior occasions. "If you would kindly check my account within your system," Evelyn implored Ryan, who was hovering nervously behind his teller station, "you will ascertain that everything is in order." "Ma'am, we are handling this matter now," Maddox stated curtly. "The bank has grounds to believe you are attempting to perpetrate fraud." "Fraud?" Evelyn's voice cracked. "That is preposterous. The funds are mine." A few patrons shifted uncomfortably, their gazes darting between the confrontation and their mobile devices or the floor. No one offered a word of support. "Do you possess any other form of identification?" Harlan inquired, his tone marginally less hostile than his partner's. "Yes, I have my social security card in my purse," Evelyn stated, reaching for her bag. "Deceased," Maddox commanded, his hand instinctively moving towards his weapon. "Keep your hands where I can see them." "I am merely retrieving my—" Maddox moved with astonishing alacrity for a man of his stature. He seized Evelyn's arm, the one not occupied by her cane, and twisted it behind her back. She cried out in pain as her purse stumbled to the floor, its contents of tissues and medicine bottles scattering across the polished tiles. "You are injuring me," she gasped. "Cease resisting," Maddox growled, though she was not offering any resistance whatsoever. With practiced efficiency, he fastened a handcuff around her wrist, the frigid metal biting into her skin. Her cane clattered to the floor as he secured her other wrist, yanking her arms back with such force that she feared her shoulder might dislocate. The bank had fallen into complete silence. Evelyn could perceive nothing but her own ragged breathing and the rush of blood in her ears. Tears welled in her eyes, not from fear, but from the sheer humiliation of the entire ordeal. She had lived through the civil rights era, had witnessed water hoses deployed against individuals, had been subjected to epithets no human being should ever endure. And here she was, 7 decades later, being treated as a criminal for attempting to assist her granddaughter. Evelyn Bird, you are under arrest for attempted bank fraud and resisting arrest, Maddox proclaimed loudly. I did not resist. I have done nothing wrong, Evelyn protested, her voice breaking. Harlan retrieved her cane and folder, averting his eyes as he did so. Maddox gripped her upper arm with sufficient force to inflict bruising and began to march her towards the exit. Her legs, already aching from arthritis, struggled to keep pace with his stride. My purse, she pleaded desperately. My medication is in my purse. We shall confiscate it as evidence, Maddox replied coldly. Outside, the morning had grown warmer. The sun seemed to mock the darkness of the unfolding events as Maddox propelled Evelyn across the parking lot towards the waiting patrol car. From the periphery of her vision, Evelyn perceived activity. A cluster of motorcycles was parked near the ATM on the side of the building. Large gleaming machines with riders clad in leather standing beside them. Through her tears, she recognized the reddish beard of the largest man, the one they referred to as Big Red, who invariably offered a respectful nod as she passed by on Friday mornings. Occasionally, she had provided them with leftover pastries from her church's Thursday evening social gathering. Big Red was observing now, his expression transitioning from bewilderment to recognition to something more somber as he took in the scene before him. The other bikers, whose peculiar monikers she knew, Knuckles, Stitch, and Tinker, were also turning towards the commotion. Please, Evelyn implored Maddox, her voice barely audible. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. Save it for the judge, Maddox snapped, pushing her forward once more. Her toe caught on a fissure in the asphalt, causing her to stumble. Maddox roughly yanked her upright, eliciting another cry of pain as it shot through her shoulders. That sound, her cry of agony, seemed to catalyze something. From the vicinity of the ATM, heavy footsteps emerged. Evelyn turned her head to witness Big Red striding towards them, his colossal frame moving with surprising purpose. His leather vest displayed patches she had never fully comprehended but had always respected. Behind him, the other bikers rose like a formidable wall of leather and denim. Big Red halted directly in their path, his weathered face set like stone as he regarded the officers. His gaze briefly met Evelyn's, a flash of recognition passing between them before he returned his steely stare to Maddox. He uttered no words. He had no need to. His very presence, 6 feet 4 inches of tattooed intensity, crowned by a fiery red beard, conveyed a powerful message. The other angels spread out behind him, forming a silent barrier between the police vehicle and Evelyn. Maddox's grip on Evelyn's arm tightened painfully. She could feel him tense, suddenly uncertain, as he confronted not a frail grandmother whom he could intimidate, but something entirely different. Men who harbored no apprehension of him whatsoever. Move aside, Maddox commanded. However, his voice had lost some of its accustomed sharpness. This is police business. Big Red did not budge. He simply stood there, helmet in hand, his eyes locked on Maddox, with the quietude of someone who had witnessed far too much in life to be easily cowed. Behind him, engines rumbled as additional motorcycles entered the lot. Excuse me, officer. Big Red's voice was surprisingly composed, almost gentle, yet possessed an unmistakable edge of tempered steel beneath its surface. Would you mind enlightening us as to why you are apprehending Miss Evelyn? Maddox's head snapped upward. His hand instinctively moved towards his firearm, but he restrained himself when he realized the sheer number of bikers now forming a loose semicircle around the police car. There were at least 8 of them. Massive individuals clad in leather vests adorned with patches, their arms crossed or hands on hips, their faces inscrutable behind sunglasses and beards. "This is police business," Maddox retorted, but Evelyn could detect a slight tremor in his voice. "Back up now, or you shall join her." Harlan shifted nervously beside them, his eyes darting between the bikers and his partner. Instead of retreating, the bikers advanced a single step in perfect unison. They made no physical contact, nor did they issue threats, merely held their ground. "You see, that is where you err," Big Red stated, removing his sunglasses. "Miss Evelyn occasionally brings us cookies. She speaks of her granddaughter. She is a friend," he gestured round them, "and we look after our friends." Tinker, a slender biker with a lengthy grey ponytail, had produced his mobile device and was meticulously filming the entire interaction. Other patrons from the bank had congregated at the entrance, and several also held their phones aloft. "Put that away," Harlan commanded, pointing at Tinker's device. "Public place, public servant," Tinker replied calmly. "It is my right." Evelyn stood awkwardly between Maddox and the car door, her wrists throbbing within the handcuffs. She caught sight of Frank Dillard observing from the bank's doorway, his smug expression beginning to dissipate as he recognized the burgeoning number of witnesses now recording the event. "What is she purportedly accused of doing?" Big Red inquired, his gaze fixed on Maddox's. "Because from our vantage point, it appeared to be an elderly woman attempting to retrieve her own funds from her own bank account." Knuckles, a burly biker with tattoos covering both his arms, nodded in agreement. "Been coming here every Friday morning for years, never caused any trouble." The radio on Maddox's shoulder crackled to life. "Unit 17, this is dispatch. What is your status at Stonebrook Federal?" Maddox hesitated, then grasped the radio. "Situation under control," he responded tightly. "We are receiving multiple calls regarding a confrontation in the parking lot," the dispatcher replied. "Do you require backup?" People were now assembling on the sidewalk. Vehicles slowed as they passed. Someone from within the bank had evidently alerted the authorities. The dispatcher continued. "The chief has instructed to de-escalate and clear the scene. Repeat, de-escalate and clear." Maddox's face flushed crimson. He glared at the bikers, then at Evelyn, then at the growing crowd. "This is not concluded," he muttered. Then, more audibly, "Turn around, ma'am." With stiff movements, he unlocked Evelyn's handcuffs. She immediately brought her hands forward, rubbing her wrists where angry red welts were already forming. "It appears there has been a misunderstanding," Maddox announced loudly enough for the onlookers to hear. "You are free to depart." Evelyn was rendered speechless. Her throat had constricted with unshed tears. The profound relief of her release warred with the deep humiliation of the arrest and the sheer injustice of the entire affair. "A misunderstanding," Big Red echoed, his voice dangerously quiet. "Is that what you call placing handcuffs on a grandmother for no conceivable reason?" Stitch, a barrel-chested biker with a neatly trimmed gray beard, stepped forward and gently placed his hand beneath Evelyn's elbow. "Are you quite all right, Miss Evelyn?" he inquired softly. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. "Let us escort you back inside to complete your transaction," Stitch suggested. "We will remain with you." The bikers formed a protective perimeter around her as they proceeded back towards the bank entrance. Maddox and Harlan made no attempt to impede them. They retreated to their patrol car, engaged in hushed, irate conversation. Frank Dillard stood in the doorway, his countenance a facade of forced pleasantry. "Mrs. Bird," he stated smoothly, "I am profoundly sorry for the confusion. If you would kindly accompany me to my office, we can—" "There was no confusion whatsoever," Big Red interrupted. You summoned the constabulary upon her for withdrawing her own funds. Frank's smile became strained. I assure you, it was a misinterpretation of... I simply wish to retrieve my funds, Evelyn stated, finding her voice at last. The $4,000 from my account for my granddaughter's housing deposit. Frank hesitated, his gaze flicking between her and the imposing circle of bikers. Of course, immediately. Inside, the bank had fallen into an unnerving quietude. Patrons stared as the improbable group advanced towards the counter. Evelyn's purse and cane had been retrieved from the floor. The scattered contents had been collected and returned to her bag. Ryan, the young teller, could not meet her gaze as he counted out the currency. His hands trembled slightly. Here you are, Mrs. Bird, he said, pushing the money across the counter. I am truly apologetic for what transpired. Evelyn carefully placed the cash into her wallet, then tucked it deep within her purse. Her own hands were still shaking. The adrenaline was subsiding, leaving her feeling utterly depleted and suddenly very aged. Might we offer you a ride home, Miss Evelyn? Big Red inquired as they emerged back into the daylight. Do you believe you should not be alone at this moment? She looked up at him. This man of immense stature with fierce eyes that inexplicably held only kindness when directed at her. I am not certain, she responded hesitantly. I typically utilize the bus. There's no inconvenience at all, he reassured her. We were actually headed in that general direction. This statement was untrue, a fact known to both of them. However, Evelyn felt far too unsettled to dispute it. The idea of being on a bus, attempting to maintain composure in the presence of strangers, was simply too daunting. Thank you, she murmured, her voice barely audible. I would be most grateful for that. Big Red gave a slight nod and indicated the motorcycles waiting nearby. Don't fret. We'll proceed at a leisurely pace, he promised with a disarming smile. Knuckles' bike was equipped with a sidecar. It's likely the most comfortable seat you'll ever experience. As they approached the motorcycles, Evelyn was acutely aware of the watching eyes from the bank's windows, like an invisible audience. Customers observed their movements, while officers remained stationed in their patrol vehicle. Maddox's countenance a mask of fury. Knuckles assisted her into the sidecar, ensuring she was settled comfortably and securely. Is this your inaugural motorcycle excursion? He inquired with a broad grin. It is, and quite possibly my last, Evelyn confessed, managing a faint smile despite the circumstances. You might discover a change of heart after this, he suggested, offering her a spare helmet. There's an unparalleled sensation of freedom on the open road. As the engines roared to life around her, Evelyn cast one final look at Officers Maddox and Harlan, watching with palpable helplessness from their squad car. Their expressions were contorted with frustration and a hint of what seemed to be a promise of future entanglements. But for the present moment, enveloped by her unexpected protectors, Evelyn experienced a sentiment she hadn't anticipated, a feeling of security. The motorcycles departed the parking area in perfect unison, conveying her away from the bank and the morning's distressing events. Trailing behind them, the officer's patrol car remained stationary, unable to pursue without exposing the petty nature of their intentions to the onlookers. Evelyn's modest dwelling on Maple Street appeared precisely as she had left it that morning. The cheerful yellow curtains still swayed gently in the open windows. Her porch swing continued its familiar creak in the late morning air. Beside the front steps, her garden gnome maintained its weathered, chipped smile. Yet, an undeniable shift had occurred in the atmosphere. The resonant hum of motorcycles pierced the tranquility of her neighborhood as the Hells Angels arrived at her curb, moving with immaculate precision. Across the street, Mrs. Parker peered cautiously through her blinds, her jaw agape at the sight of her elderly neighbor disembarking from a motorcycle sidecar with the assistance of a heavily tattooed man. My deepest thanks, Evelyn expressed as Knuckles offered his support. Her legs still felt unsteady, and the gravity of the events at the bank was deepening with each passing moment. Big Red removed his helmet and gazed up at her neat little residence, adorned with flower boxes and wind chimes. "You have a lovely abode, Miss Evelyn. Would you care to step inside for some iced tea?" she proposed, surprising even herself. "I have fresh mint from my garden." "I wouldn't wish to impose," Big Red replied, though his gaze softened at her invitation. "Please," Evelyn insisted. "I could truly use some company right now." The prospect of being alone with her thoughts suddenly felt overwhelming. Big Red acknowledged her with a nod to the others. "You gentlemen be on your way. Knuckles and I will ensure Miss Evelyn is settled." The other bikers offered respectful nods to Evelyn before starting their engines and departing. Only Big Red and Knuckles remained, accompanying her up the well-trodden wooden steps to her front porch. Inside, Evelyn's hands trembled as she poured ice into 3 glasses from the freezer. "Allow me to assist with that," Knuckles offered gently, taking the pitcher from her unsteady grasp. "You just take a seat." "I'm not typically this way," Evelyn remarked, settling onto a kitchen chair. "I don't quite understand what's come over me." "It's shock," Big Red stated plainly, taking a seat opposite her. His imposing physique made the kitchen chair appear rather diminutive. What transpired today was entirely unacceptable. Knuckles placed the glasses of tea on the table and occupied the third chair. Despite his formidable appearance, with arms adorned with tattoos and a leather vest bearing unfamiliar patches, his movements were remarkably careful and considerate within her home. "I've never had so much as a parking violation in all my 74 years, Evelyn began, her voice small. "You weren't in any trouble today either," Big Red asserted firmly. "Those officers were in the wrong, pure and simple." Evelyn traced the red marks on her wrists where the handcuffs had left their impression. "I was merely attempting to assist my granddaughter with her college accommodation. That was all," her voice quivered. $4,000? My own money? "That manager had absolutely no right," Knuckles declared, a flicker of indignation crossing his face. "I've been observing that individual for years. He treats people disparately based on their background." "Do you happen to notice that as well?" Evelyn inquired. Big Red nodded. "We observe a great deal from our vantage point in that parking lot. People seldom pay us much mind, so we tend to notice things." "Such as?" Evelyn prompted, taking a sip of her tea. "For instance," Knuckles elaborated, "how that fellow from the bank rushes to open the door for certain patrons while making others wait. Or how some individuals are offered refreshments and comfortable seating, while others are subjected to intense questioning over minor transactions." Evelyn nodded slowly. "I've always sensed it, but I convinced myself I was being overly sensitive." "You weren't," Big Red assured her. "And what occurred today crossed a significant boundary." "Why did you intervene?" Evelyn asked. "You had no obligation to get involved." Big Red appeared almost abashed. "Do you recall last Christmas? You brought us those gingerbread cookies when we were collecting for the toy drive." Evelyn offered a faint smile. "I remember you were all enduring the cold out there. And last spring, during that downpour, you emerged with that large umbrella for Tinker while he was working on his motorcycle." She nodded. "That's precisely why," Big Red stated simply. "You treat people with kindness, and we reciprocate." Evelyn felt tears welling anew. "I simply cannot comprehend their actions towards me today." Big Red and Knuckles exchanged a knowing glance, conveying that they understood perfectly, but were too courteous to articulate it directly. "Listen," Big Red said, retrieving a small notebook from his pocket. He jotted down some information and slid it across the table. "Here's my number. Feel free to call any time you require assistance, day or night." Evelyn looked at the paper. "I couldn't possibly impose." "It's not an imposition," Knuckles interjected gently. "It's about community. And in this circle, you are now part of ours." They remained for an additional half hour, engaged in quiet conversation, ensuring Evelyn had regained her composure before their departure. Big Red insisted on inspecting her locks and peering through her windows, as if assessing her home's security. Knuckles inquired if she had any family nearby who could stay with her. "Only my granddaughter, but she's attending college in Durham," Evelyn explained. "I don't wish to alarm her with this situation." As they finally departed, Evelyn stood on her porch and watched their motorcycles recede around the corner. The neighborhood seemed to collectively exhale, returning to its customary quietude. "It's over now," she reassured herself, re-entering her home. "A terrible misstep, but it is concluded." She spent the ensuing hours attempting to calm her nerves. She tended to her plants, folded laundry, and prepared a simple meal she found herself unable to consume. Every few minutes, she would unconsciously rub her wrists, the phantom sensation of the handcuffs still constricting her skin. At 3 o'clock, her telephone rang. Evelyn did not recognize the number, but answered nonetheless. "Mrs. Bird." A young woman's voice, hushed and urgent, came through. "Yes, this is she. This is Marisol Rivera. I'm a teller at Stonebrook Federal. I witnessed what transpired this morning." Evelyn sank heavily onto her couch. "Oh, I see. I'm calling because—" The young woman paused, and Evelyn could discern her nervous breathing. "Because I couldn't rest tonight if I didn't convey the truth to you." "The truth about what, my dear?" "Mr. Dillard did not summon the police because he suspected you were engaging in illicit activity," Marisol whispered. "He called them because he objected to you withdrawing such a substantial amount of cash." Evelyn's heart pounded with alarming intensity. "What do you mean?" "After you departed, he was jovially recounting the incident in his office with Ryan. He stated he was teaching you a lesson about—" Marisol's voice dropped even lower, "about individuals like yourself attempting to withdraw such large sums all at once." Evelyn's grip on the receiver tightened. "I see. He informed Ryan that you were likely laundering money for street youths. That's how he referred to them. He claimed, your kind always profess it's for family, but it's invariably for—" Marisol couldn't finish the sentence. "For narcotics," Evelyn supplied, her voice hollow. "I am so profoundly sorry, Mrs. Bird. It was not right. None of it was just." "No," Evelyn agreed softly. "It was not." "I could face dismissal for divulging this information to you," Marisol added, "but my grandmother instilled in me the importance of speaking out when someone has been wronged." "Thank you for informing me, Marisol," Evelyn said. "Your grandmother raised you exceptionally well." After they concluded their conversation, Evelyn remained motionless on the couch, the afternoon sun casting elongated shadows across the living room through her curtains. The house suddenly felt too hushed, too deserted. She walked deliberately to her kitchen table and sat down, placing her hands flat upon its surface. The contusions on her wrists were deepening, transitioning from a vibrant red to a dark purple hue. "So it was not an error after all," she whispered into the silent room. The realization settled upon her like a heavy shroud. Not a misinterpretation, not an overzealous bank teller, not a momentary lapse in judgment. It was intentional. It was because of who I am. It was because Frank Dillard had perceived a 74-year-old black grandmother and seen something menacing, something criminal, something less than human. Outside her window, a neighbor's lawnmower droned persistently. A dog barked in the distance. A car door slammed. The world continued its ordinary course as if nothing significant had occurred, as if her dignity had not been cruelly stripped away before a gathering of bank patrons, as if she had not been subjected to handcuffs and nearly manhandled for attempting to access her own funds. Evelyn gently touched the bruises, feeling the palpable pain beneath her fingertips, tangible proof of the day's events. Evidence she could neither dismiss nor rationalize. The tears she had been holding back finally cascaded down, silently tracing paths on her cheeks as she sat in solitary contemplation at her kitchen table. Evelyn compelled herself to consume a modest dinner, despite the complete absence of appetite. She moved through her kitchen with practiced automatic motions, chopping vegetables, stirring broth for her soup, and toasting a single slice of bread. The familiar routine provided a semblance of solace, though her thoughts continually returned to Marisol's call. "Lord, grant me strength," she whispered to herself, a prayer that had been her constant support throughout her life. Just as she lifted the spoon towards her lips, a sudden, jarring crash from outside shattered the prevailing quiet. The distinct sound of metal impacting pavement echoed throughout the front of the house. Evelyn froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. She carefully placed her spoon down and moved cautiously toward her front window, parting the curtain just enough to peer outside. In the muted glow of the street lamp, she could discern her mailbox lying askew on the ground, violently torn from its post. A hooded figure, clad in dark attire, was sprinting down the street, vanishing around the corner. "Oh my heavens!" she gasped, her hand flying to her chest. She hesitated at her front door, then gathered her resolve and opened it. Standing on her porch, she surveyed the damage. Her robust metal mailbox, installed 15 years prior by her late husband, lay dented and twisted on the sidewalk. Its wooden post had been fractured in half, with splinters scattered across her lawn. A neighbor's porch light flickered on. "Evelyn, are you all right out there?" Mrs. Parker called from across the street. "Someone has vandalized my mailbox," Evelyn responded, her voice trembling. "Did you happen to see who it was?" "I just saw someone running away. It appeared to be one of those teenagers from down Maple Street." Evelyn returned inside and reached for her telephone. With fingers that quivered, she dialed the non-emergency police number. A monotone voice responded, "Police department." "Yes, hello. I wish to report damage to my property," Evelyn explained, striving to maintain a steady tone. "Someone has just destroyed my mailbox." "Your address, ma'am?" 412 Willow Street. A brief pause ensued, followed by the sound of typing. "Your name?" "Evelyn Bird." Another pause, longer this time. "And you stated this incident involves a mailbox?" "Yes, someone ripped it directly from its post. I am a senior citizen." "And ma'am, we can certainly take a report. However, honestly, vandalism of this nature is typically perpetrated by juveniles. We likely won't be able to achieve much." Evelyn frowned. "But I just saw the individual fleeing. If an officer could come now." "We are currently short-staffed this evening, Mrs. Bird. I can arrange for someone to drive by tomorrow to take a report if you would prefer." The dismissive tone of the dispatcher's voice caused Evelyn's stomach to clench. "Yes, please do that. We will endeavor to have someone there tomorrow afternoon." After hanging up, Evelyn returned to her cooling soup. She ate mechanically, the food devoid of taste. Her thoughts raced. Was it truly merely teenagers? The timing seemed almost too coincidental, occurring mere hours after her mortifying experience at the bank. She washed her dishes and settled in her living room with a book, finding her focus elusive. Every passing vehicle prompted her to glance towards the window. Just past 8 o'clock, a patrol car cruised slowly past her residence. Even through the curtains, she recognized Officer Maddox at the wheel. His driving was not typical. He was crawling along, his head turned toward her home. Evelyn's blood ran cold. She extinguished her reading lamp and moved to the window, peering intently through a minuscule gap in the curtains. The patrol car reached the end of the block, executed a U-turn, and proceeded past her house once more, even more slowly this time. "This is not right," she whispered to herself. "This is not right at all." She double-checked all her locks before retiring early, the exhaustion from the stressful day finally taking its toll. Sleep came fitfully, populated by dreams of handcuffs and disdainful faces. A sharp rapping sound against her front window jolted her awake. Evelyn sat up in bed, her heart pounding erratically. The bedside clock indicated 9:30 p.m. Another rap, followed by a splattering noise. She hurried to her window and peered out just in time to see a car speeding away. No headlights, only the receding taillights disappearing down the street. Evelyn refrained from turning on any lights. Instead, she moved with deliberate caution through her darkened house to the front door. As she opened it, the offensive odor assailed her immediately, the acrid stench of rotten eggs. Her porch was a disarray. Raw eggs dripped down her front door, smeared across her welcome mat, and splattered on the porch railings. At least half a dozen projectiles had been hurled. She closed the door quietly, leaning against it. There was no point in contacting the police again. It was now abundantly clear they would not be coming to her aid. Sleep was an impossibility after that. Evelyn sat in her darkened living room until the first rays of dawn illuminated the sky, startling at every sound emanating from outside. As the morning light finally filtered through her curtains, she opened the front door to assess the damage in the daylight. The eggs had begun to dry, forming a crusty, yellowish mess all over her porch. And there, conspicuously affixed to her door with clear tape, was an official-looking notice she had not discerned in the darkness. Citation: Lawn height violation, it read in bold lettering. City Code 32.4b, grass exceeding 8 inches. Fine, $150. Officer issuing citation, B. Maddox. Evelyn stared at the paper, then at her lawn. It had been mowed only 5 days prior by the neighborhood boy she employed. The grass was nowhere near 8 inches high. "This is a consequence of yesterday," she whispered, finally grasping the situation. "They are retaliating against me." She began scrubbing the eggs from her porch with a determination fueled by anger rather than fear. By the time she concluded an hour later, her arms ached, but her porch was largely clean. Just as she discarded the dirty water from her bucket, the unmistakable rumble of a motorcycle approached. Big Red pulled up to her curb, his formidable bike gleaming in the morning sun. He killed the engine and dismounted, his expression shifting from amiable to concerned as he observed her weary appearance. "Miss Evelyn, are you quite all right?" Evelyn hesitated, then shook her head. "No, I fear I am not." She invited him inside and prepared fresh coffee. As they sat at her kitchen table, she recounted everything: Marisol's call, the damaged mailbox, the patrol car's lingering presence, the eggs, and the spurious citation. Big Red's countenance darkened with each detail. His massive hands tightened around the coffee mug until Evelyn feared it might shatter. "This is no random act," he stated definitively. "This is a deliberate message they are sending." "That is precisely my belief as well," Evelyn admitted. "But what am I to do? I cannot contend with the police." Big Red placed his mug down with a decisive thud. "No, but we can provide you with protection." He withdrew his phone and made a brief call. "Knuckles, gather the crew. Miss Evelyn is being subjected to harassment." "Yes, that officer from yesterday." He listened for a moment. "Yes, I anticipated you'd feel that way. I am currently at a residence." Within the hour, 4 motorcycles were parked outside Evelyn's house. The riders, Big Red, Knuckles, Stitch, and a woman Evelyn had not previously met named Ramona, convened in her living room. Their leather vests and tattoos appeared incongruous amidst her floral-patterned furnishings and framed cross-stitched biblical verses adorning the walls. "We are establishing a rotation," Big Red explained. "Someone will make a pass-by every hour. We'll utilize different bikes and riders so as not to arouse immediate suspicion. You are not obligated to undertake this, Evelyn protested. With all due respect, ma'am, we are, Stitch stated firmly. He was the youngest of the group, possessing kind eyes that belied his imposing appearance. Those officers are abusing their authority, and that is unacceptable. We look after our own, Ramona added, her voice gentle despite her formidable demeanor. And like it or not, you are now one of us. Throughout the remainder of the day, Evelyn observed from her window as various motorcycles cruised past her house at regular intervals. The neighbors also took notice, curtains twitching up and down the street. Mrs. Parker telephoned once to ascertain Evelyn's well-being, her voice laced with concern regarding the presence of those bikers. By evening, Evelyn felt more secure than she had since the incident at the bank. The bikers had repaired her mailbox, reattaching it to a new post they had procured from the hardware store. Stitch had even mowed her lawn, though it hardly required it. As darkness descended, Big Red returned for the night watch. He positioned his motorcycle at the far end of Evelyn Street, partially concealed by the shadow of a large oak tree. From her window, Evelyn could discern his silhouette. Broad-shouldered and vigilant, the motorcycle's engine emitting a soft rumble as he maintained his watch over her home. The sight brought tears to her eyes, not of fear or sorrow this time, but of profound gratitude. For the first time since her handcuffs had been removed, she felt genuinely safeguarded. Monday morning dawned with golden sunlight streaming through Evelyn's kitchen curtains. She sat at her small wooden table, sipping tea and attempting to soothe the lingering ache in her wrists. The events of the preceding weekend still weighed heavily on her mind. The mail slot clicked and envelopes dropped onto the floor. Evelyn sighed, set down her mug, and shuffled to retrieve them. Bills, advertisements, and an official-looking envelope from Stonebrook Federal Bank. Her stomach tightened. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope and unfolded the crisp letter within. "Dear Miss Bird," she read aloud, "we regret to inform you that your account has been flagged for unusual activity and is temporarily frozen, pending review." Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. The room seemed to tilt precariously. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." The telephone rang, startling her. She answered with a trembling, "Hello." "Miss Evelyn, it's Big Red. Just checking in on you this morning." Evelyn's voice cracked as she explained the contents of the letter. "They've frozen my account. I won't be able to support my granddaughter." A prolonged pause followed. "We'll be there in 20 minutes, Big Red stated, his voice resonating with steely resolve. True to his word, engines revved outside Evelyn's residence precisely 20 minutes after their conversation. "Let me examine that," Big Red requested softly, accepting the document. His gaze sharpened as he scanned its contents. "This is utter rubbish," he declared, a low growl in his voice. "Complete drivel. They're intentionally targeting you." A tall individual, his beard flecked with silver and his hands remarkably steady, acknowledged the statement with a nod. "You need to go down there and rectify this situation," Evelyn admitted, her voice laced with apprehension. "I'm not sure I can face them again." Knuckles, his formidable arms crossed over his broad chest, offered a curt shake of his head. "You will not be facing them by yourself, Miss Evelyn. Not this time. Not ever again." 40 minutes later, an uncommon convoy arrived at the doorstep of Stonebrook Federal Bank. Evelyn, attired in her finest Sunday ensemble, a chic lavender skirt suit complemented by delicate pearl studs, walked with an air of unwavering dignity. 4 bikers, clad in black leather, flanked her, their expressions resolute, their heavy boots striking the pavement with purpose. As they neared the building's entrance, Frank Dillard materialized behind the glass doors, his face visibly reddening. He strode outside, positioning himself directly in their path. "Miss Bird, you are welcome to enter," but these gentlemen will need to wait outside. Big Red stepped forward. We are her security detail. Frank's nostrils flared. This is a professional institution. We adhere to specific protocols. It's quite all right, Evelyn interjected, gently touching Big Red's arm. I can manage this part. You gentlemen wait right here where I can keep an eye on you. The bikers exchanged a knowing glance, then assented. We'll be right here, Big Red proclaimed loudly enough for Frank to overhear. Observing through those windows. Tinker added, every move, every utterance. Evelyn straightened her shoulders and proceeded inside with Frank. The bank's interior was largely deserted. A few patrons glanced up, recognizing her from the previous Friday's events. A murmur of whispers followed her progress toward the manager's desk. Frank took a seat, meticulously straightening his tie. Now, Miss Bird, regarding your account, may I inquire why it has been placed on hold? Evelyn's question was direct. Frank's smile was brittle. For security reasons, we detected unusual withdrawal attempts. The only unusual thing was being apprehended for attempting to access my own funds, Evelyn countered. That was an unfortunate incident. However, our fraud detection system has flagged your account. There is nothing further I can do, Frank stated, shrugging, a subtle smirk playing at the edge of his lips. It's bank policy. How long will this review process take? Evelyn inquired, a knot of dread forming in her stomach. It's difficult to say. It could be days, or it could extend to weeks. Through the window, Evelyn could discern the bikers maintaining their vigil, their unwavering presence bolstering her courage. From the periphery of her vision, Evelyn noticed Marisol, the young teller who had initiated the prior call. She was ostensibly organizing papers, but her attention was clearly elsewhere. I would like to speak with someone else, Evelyn demanded. I am the manager, Miss Bird. There is no one else. Evelyn rose to her feet. In that case, I will speak with your supervisor at the regional office. Frank's smile evaporated. Please be seated, Miss Bird. Creating a public disturbance will not improve your current predicament. Outside, the bikers tensed, their gazes fixed on Frank's hardening expression. I am not creating a disturbance, Evelyn stated with clarity. I am seeking an explanation regarding my funds, which you are unable to access until your review is finalized. Frank snapped. Now, if you're done wasting my time, a soft voice interjected. Marisol had approached the desk. Miss Bird has a telephone call waiting. Frank frowned. She may take it at the courtesy phone. Marisol guided Evelyn to a telephone situated near the rear of the establishment. Once they were out of Frank's earshot, she whispered conspiratorially, There is no actual call. I simply needed to inform you that Frank personally flagged your account this morning. He placed a fraud alert on it immediately after opening. I overheard him discussing it humorously with Ryan. Evelyn's chest tightened. Why would he do that? He said he was teaching a lesson about respect. Marisol's eyes darted nervously toward Frank's desk. I could jeopardize my employment by revealing this. Thank you, my dear, Evelyn whispered. I will not forget your kindness. Upon her return to Frank's desk, her eyes gleamed with renewed resolve. I shall return, she declared simply, and I will not be alone. Outside, the bikers immediately surrounded her as she relayed Marisol's revelation. Their expressions darkened with palpable anger. That is blatant harassment, Stitch declared. Obvious as day. They escorted her to their motorcycles. However, just as they prepared to depart, a police vehicle entered the parking lot. Officer Maddox emerged, adjusting his belt. Let's go, Big Red muttered. No point provoking that situation further today. They rode in formation back towards Evelyn's neighborhood. While stopped at a traffic signal, Knuckles observed the same police cruiser following them. As they subsequently separated, with Evelyn riding alongside Big Red and the others taking independent routes home, the cruiser continued to tail Knuckles. Flashing lights appeared in his rearview mirror. Knuckles safely pulled over, keeping his hands clearly visible on the handlebars. Officer Maddox approached, his hand resting near his sidearm. "License and registration, please." "What seems to be the issue, officer?" Knuckles inquired calmly. A faulty taillight. Maddox's grin did not extend to his eyes. Knuckles was aware that his taillight was in perfect working order, having meticulously checked all his lights just the preceding day. Yet, he surrendered his documentation without protest. Maddox deliberately took his time in composing a citation, then leaned in closely as he presented it. "Refrain from interfering in Stonebrook's affairs," he stated in a low tone. "You bikers believe you control this town?" "You don't. We do. Just assisting a friend," Knuckles replied evenly. "Your friend should exercise better judgment and avoid causing trouble," Maddox tapped the ticket book against his palm. "Next time, it won't be merely a citation." Tuesday afternoon saw sunlight filtering through Evelyn's lace curtains, casting delicate dappled patterns across her dining room table. 4 leather-clad bikers were seated somewhat uncomfortably in her modest wooden chairs, appearing incongruous amidst her floral placemats and fine china teacups. "Begin from the outset, Miss Evelyn," Big Red requested gently. "Every single detail is significant." For the subsequent hour, she meticulously recounted every moment: the suspicious teller's actions, Frank's dismissive demeanor, the officer's aggressive posture, the constricting bite of the handcuffs. She described the crucial phone call from Marisol, the act of vandalism, and the preceding day's account freeze. Stitch's pen moved swiftly across his notepad. "This is a textbook case of harassment," he murmured. "And discrimination," Knuckles added, his voice a deep rumble. Tinker, who had remained largely silent, suddenly became animated. "You know what?" he exclaimed, reaching for his mobile phone. "We possess more evidence than they might realize." He tapped at his screen, then presented it to Evelyn. The video displayed her outside the bank, in handcuffs, with Officer Maddox forcefully guiding her toward a patrol car. "Our helmet-mounted cameras," Tinker elaborated with a hint of pride. "Most of us wear them for safety while riding. I captured the entire incident from the moment they escorted you out." Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth as she watched herself on the small screen, appearing small, frightened, and vulnerable. "And I have footage from inside," Stitch chimed in. "When we escorted you back in, it captured a clear image of Frank's expression when he understood we were not departing." Big Red nodded thoughtfully. "This is excellent, truly excellent." He then turned his attention to Evelyn. "Miss Evelyn, have you ever encountered the name Samuel Given?" She responded with a shake of her head. "He's a civil rights attorney. He's handled cases similar to yours previously. He has offices downtown." Big Red's voice softened. "My sister used to clean houses for his family many years ago. She said he was a man of integrity, fair, a lawyer." Evelyn hesitated. "I don't possess the financial means for such complex legal matters." Stitch interjected. "They typically operate on a contingency basis, meaning you only pay if you prevail." "Prevail in what?" Evelyn inquired. "Justice?" Knuckles supplied simply. They dedicated the next hour to meticulously organizing a comprehensive timeline of events. Stitch affixed a large sheet of paper to Evelyn's wall, marking each incident with precise dates and times. Tinker transferred the video files onto Evelyn's older laptop, creating redundant backup copies. "We require more," Big Red stated finally. "We need to apprehend them by their own words." "How might we achieve that?" Evelyn asked. Knuckles produced a small device from his pocket. "Record your telephone conversations. It's permissible in this state with one-party consent. This signifies that only one individual participating in the call needs to be aware of the recording." "That individual would be me," Evelyn affirmed. Evelyn gazed at the recorder. "You want me to ensnare them?" "We want you to safeguard yourself," Big Red corrected. "The truth is not a trap, Miss Evelyn." Tinker stood abruptly. I will return in 20 minutes. I have something at my residence that might prove useful. While they awaited his return, Stitch assisted Evelyn in practicing the operation of the recorder. They conducted mock calls to each other, familiarizing themselves with its discrete activation. Contact the bank, Stitch suggested. Inquire about your account again. Observe their responses when they are unaware they are being recorded. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she dialed. The call connected to customer service, who then transferred her to Frank's office. "Miss Bird," Frank's voice dripped with feigned politeness. "I informed you yesterday. Your account remains under review." "How long will this process take?" Evelyn inquired, her voice conveying a confidence she did not entirely feel. "I require access to my funds. As I previously explained, our fraud detection system has identified unusual activity. There is nothing I can do about bank policy. Is there anything I can provide to expedite this process?" A brief pause ensued. "Individuals like yourself would be better served by utilizing check-cashing establishments rather than proper financial institutions. It entails less administrative work for everyone." Evelyn's breath hitched. "What do you mean by individuals like myself?" "I believe we have concluded our discussion here, Miss Bird." The line went dead. Stitch gave her a congratulatory thumbs up. "Got it all. The people like you comment. That's gold." Tinker returned with a laptop and a small printer. "Let's draft some official statements while everything is still fresh." They worked diligently throughout the afternoon. Evelyn contacted Marisol, who agreed to provide a written statement detailing Frank's remarks, despite her apprehension regarding her employment. Tinker assured her they could arrange a discreet meeting. By late afternoon, they had compiled an impressive dossier of evidence: video footage, recorded phone calls, witness testimonies, photographs of Evelyn's bruised wrists, the bank's official notification, and the spurious citation. Wednesday morning dawned with a sense of clarity that Evelyn had not experienced in days. She stood before her bathroom mirror, meticulously applying a subtle touch of pink lipstick and securing her silver hair with pearlescent pins. Today was not about enhancing her appearance. It was about reclaiming her inherent dignity. "Someone is approaching, Miss Evelyn," Mrs. Parker called from her adjacent residence. "It sounds like a motorcycle procession." Evelyn smiled as she peered through her curtains. 4 motorcycles rumbled to a stop directly in front of her house, their chrome accents gleaming brilliantly in the morning sun. Big Red dismounted first, removing his helmet and smoothing his beard before approaching her doorway. "Good morning, Miss Evelyn," he said as she opened the door. "Are you ready?" She nodded, clutching the binder of evidence to her chest as if it were a protective shield. "As ready as I will ever be." "We have a surprise for you," Knuckles announced, gesturing toward a sleek black automobile that was pulling up behind the motorcycles. "We surmised you might prefer not to travel on the back of a motorcycle to meet with legal counsel." "It's my cousin's vehicle," Stitch explained. "He's graciously allowing us to borrow it for the day." Evelyn's shoulders visibly relaxed. "That is remarkably considerate of you gentlemen." The journey downtown took precisely 20 minutes. Evelyn occupied the rear seat, the binder resting on her lap, observing through the window as the bikers formed a protective convoy surrounding them. Pedestrians on the sidewalks paused their journeys to stare at the unusual sight. "I never anticipated having such an escort at my age," Evelyn murmured, largely to herself. Big Red, riding alongside her window, glanced over and offered a broad grin. The Given Law offices occupied the second floor of a red brick edifice on Main Street. The understated sign displayed in the window simply read, "Samuel Given, Attorney at Law, Civil Rights, Employment Discrimination, Police Misconduct." Internally, the reception area was modest in size but impeccably maintained. Framed newspaper clippings adorned the walls, each commemorating significant civil rights victories. A young woman stationed at the front desk looked up, her eyes widening slightly at the sight of Evelyn, accompanied by 4 imposing bikers. "We have an appointment with Mr. Given," Big Red announced, "for Evelyn Bird." The receptionist offered a warm smile. "Yes, he is expecting you. Please proceed directly to his office." Samuel Given rose from behind his desk as they entered, stepping around to greet them. He was a distinguished black gentleman in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He wore a crisp navy suit without a tie, projecting an aura of approachability coupled with professional competence. "Miss Bird," he stated, taking Evelyn's hands in both of his, "I am Samuel Given. Big Red provided me with a brief overview of your circumstances when he contacted me yesterday. I am deeply sorry for the ordeal you have endured." His voice possessed a gentle authority that immediately put Evelyn at ease. He guided her toward a comfortable chair, then nodded respectfully to the bikers. "Gentlemen, I appreciate you bringing Miss Bird to me. You are welcome to remain if that is your preference." "They will remain," Evelyn declared firmly. "They are the sole reason I am here at all." Given nodded and returned to his seat. "Very well, let us commence. Please relate what transpired in your own words." For the third occasion, Evelyn recounted her harrowing experience. This time, her voice was notably steadier, her pronouncements more precise. She detailed the incident at the bank, the unwarranted application of force, the frozen financial account, and the ongoing pattern of mistreatment. Given listened with focused attention, occasionally making brief notes, but primarily maintaining direct eye contact. Upon her conclusion, he gestured toward the binder. "May I?" Evelyn handed it over. Given perused the meticulously organized evidence, his expression growing increasingly concerned with each succeeding page. When Tinker presented a USB drive containing the helmet camera footage, Given inserted it into his computer and viewed it in profound silence. The video clearly depicted Evelyn being roughly handcuffed, her slight frame appearing dwarfed by the officers. Her expression of pain was evident when Maddox forcefully twisted her arm. "Pause the playback," Given instructed sharply. He removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. "This is..." He paused, carefully selecting his terminology. "This represents one of the most unambiguous instances of official misconduct I have encountered in many years." He replayed segments of the footage, pausing periodically to document key details. "The excessive use of force is beyond dispute, and the recorded telephone conversations with the bank manager..." He shook his head. "Miss Bird, you possess valid grounds for several legal actions here." "What precisely does that entail?" Evelyn inquired. Given leaned forward, enumerating on his fingers. "Unlawful detention, excessive force, financial discrimination, elder abuse, and retaliatory actions." He tapped his pen against the desk. "We are contemplating a civil rights lawsuit against both the police department and the bank." "A lawsuit?" Evelyn's voice faltered. "I simply wish for them to cease their harassment." "That is precisely why we must proceed," Given explained gently. "This behavior will not cease until they are held accountable. These institutions respond to tangible consequences, not appeals to moral conscience." Big Red shifted in his seat. "Inform her about the financial aspect." Given nodded. "I work on a contingency basis for cases of this nature. That implies you incur no legal fees unless we achieve a favorable outcome or a settlement. Should we succeed, I will receive a predetermined percentage of the awarded compensation." "I am not concerned with monetary gain," Evelyn stated firmly. "It is not solely about the financial compensation," Given responded. "It is about accountability. It is about ensuring that what transpired with you does not befall anyone else." Evelyn fell silent, contemplating his words. "Would I be required to provide testimony?" she finally asked. "In court?" "Potentially," Given acknowledged. "However, given this body of evidence, particularly the video recordings and audio files, there is a strong likelihood that they will opt for a settlement prior to a trial. Evelyn looked toward Big Red, then at the other bikers who had stood by her throughout this distressing ordeal. Their expressions mirrored the steadfast determination that was now solidifying within her. "What is the initial phase of this process?" she inquired. Given offered a smile, the first since their arrival. "First, you will sign my representation agreement. Subsequently, we will submit formal complaints to the State Attorney General's office, the Internal Affairs Division of the Police Department, and the Banking Commission." He produced a document and meticulously explained each clause. Evelyn listened intently, posing questions whenever clarification was needed. Finally, she accepted the pen he offered. Her signature was firm and deliberate. "Today," Given declared, rising to his feet, "we initiate our counteroffensive." The subsequent 3 hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. They drove to the state office building, where Given assisted Evelyn in filing formal complaints with multiple governmental agencies. The bikers remained steadfastly at her side, a silent, imposing presence that drew considerable attention throughout the building. With each signature Evelyn appended to an official complaint form, she felt a palpable increase in her inner strength and resolve. This was no longer solely about her personal grievance. It was about advocating for what was right and just. "You know," Stitch remarked as they departed the Attorney General's office, "you are likely the most formidable individual I have ever encountered, Miss Evelyn." She responded with a soft laugh. At 74 years of age, one learns that remaining silent does not always equate to remaining safe. By late afternoon, exhaustion began to take its toll. Given observed her fatigue and suggested they conclude their efforts for the day. "We have established a robust foundation," he assured her. "I will commence drafting the formal lawsuit tomorrow. In the interim, please continue to document any further instances of harassment." Upon their return to Evelyn's residence, the bikers insisted on conducting a thorough inspection of her property before their departure. Tinker addressed a loose step on the porch, while Stitch assisted in bringing in groceries purchased on their way home. "We will continue to patrol the area," Big Red promised, "at varying intervals, ensuring they never know when we are observing." Evelyn expressed her gratitude, which felt inadequate for their unwavering support. After they departed, she stood in her kitchen, the house once again enveloped in quietude. She retrieved Samuel Given's business card from her purse and affixed it to her refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a teapot. There it would remain, a tangible reminder that she was no longer isolated, and a testament to the necessity of self-advocacy. Evelyn prepared herself a cup of tea and settled into her preferred armchair by the window. For the first time in several days, she experienced a profound sense of peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with her head held high. Thursday evening had descended upon Evelyn's modest home like a gentle embrace. Following her evening meal, she had dedicated several hours to meticulously organizing documents in preparation for her meeting with Attorney Given the following day. The day had been remarkably tranquil. No suspicious police cruisers cruising by, no vitriolic phone calls, just a blessed respite from the turmoil. At 11:15 in the evening, Evelyn commenced her nightly ablutions. She washed her face, brushed her teeth, and changed into her cherished blue cotton nightgown. Her joints ached with a more pronounced intensity than usual, a consequence of accumulated stress and the subtle coolness in the air. "Just one final check before retiring," she murmured to herself. Evelyn ambled into the living room, leaning on her cane for support. She reached for the curtains, her fingers closing around the worn fabric that had graced those windows for nearly 2 decades. As she drew them closed, she caught a fleeting glimpse of the quiet street beyond. The neighborhood was utterly silent, the houses dark save for the illumination of porch lights. In the distance, she could discern Big Red's motorcycle parked beneath a street lamp 3 houses down, a comforting sentinel. A faint smile touched her lips. Those young men. She would never have imagined that a group of bikers could transform into her protective guardian angels. Yet, here they were, diligently maintaining their watch in shifts, ensuring her safety. Evelyn turned away from the window, satisfied that all was secure. She extinguished the table lamp, plunging the room into darkness, illuminated solely by the soft glow emanating from the hallway. The violent shattering of glass erupted through the prevailing silence. Evelyn screamed, instinctively dropping to the floor as a heavy object crashed into her living room. Fragments of glass sprayed across her carpet and coffee table. The frigid night air rushed in through the shattered window pane. Her heart pounded erratically against her ribs. For a moment, she remained paralyzed, unable to move or think. Then, the ingrained resilience cultivated over decades of raising children in often challenging environments asserted itself. "Stay down," she whispered to herself. "Just stay down." She began to crawl toward the hallway, her knees scraping against the jagged shards of glass. The Ring doorbell she had installed the previous day at Stitch's insistence would have already transmitted alerts to both her phone and Big Red's. Reaching the sanctuary of the hallway, she pulled herself upright, using the wall for support. Her phone lay on the adjacent side table. With trembling fingers, she dialed 911. "Someone shattered my window pane," Evelyn stated, her voice trembling. "I am a woman of advanced years, residing alone. Kindly expedite." The operator inquired about her location. As Evelyn relayed the information, she discerned the familiar growl of motorcycles approaching. "Ma'am, uniformed personnel are en route. Are you in a secure location?" "Yes," Evelyn confirmed, a wave of relief washing over her as she detected the sound of footsteps on her porch. "My allies are here now." She terminated the call and slowly made her way to the front entrance. Through the small aperture, she observed Big Red's imposing stature, his countenance a study in concern. "Miss Evelyn," his voice resonated from beyond the threshold. "It is Big Red and the fellows. Are you well within?" "I am coming," she responded, her hands still unsteady as she disengaged the latches. The instant the portal swung open, Big Red entered, followed by Knuckles and Tinker. They moved with unexpected fluidity for men of their size, immediately assessing the predicament. "Are you injured?" Big Red inquired, his gaze sweeping over her from head to toe. "No, I am merely unsettled," Evelyn replied. Her eyes alighted upon the sitting room, where fragments of glass gleamed under the corridor illumination. "Someone hurled an object through my window." Knuckles navigated carefully into the sitting room, activating the lights. "It is a brick," he ascertained, bending to inspect it. "There is something affixed to it." He delicately detached a slip of paper, secured to the brick with coarse string. His demeanor shifted to one of gravity as he perused the inscription. "What does it convey?" Evelyn asked, though a part of her already anticipated the answer. Knuckles presented the note to Big Red, who read it aloud. "Cease your investigation or face the consequences." The words lingered in the atmosphere like venom. Evelyn felt her resolve falter. Big Red guided her to a seat in the kitchen, away from the scattered debris. "Tinker, inspect the rear of the dwelling," Big Red directed. "Knuckles, survey the front lawn." "I have contacted Stitch. He is on his way." The men acted with alacrity. Tinker proceeded towards the rear exit, while Knuckles ventured outside to examine the perimeter. "They are aware," Evelyn whispered, her gaze fixed on the note in Big Red's grasp. "They know about the lawsuit." "We surmised as much," Big Red responded gently, "but this," he lifted the note, "this signifies their apprehension. You have instilled concern in them, Miss Evelyn." Evelyn did not derive strength from that realization. She was overcome with dread. These individuals had demonstrated their willingness to resort to intimidation. They had escalated to acts of aggression. Tinker reappeared through the doorway, his expression one of alarm. "Red, come swiftly." Big Red moved towards the rear entrance, Evelyn following, despite his gesture for her to remain stationary. What she beheld caused her heart to seize. A vibrant orange radiance illuminated her backyard. Her modest garden shed, where she stored her implements, planters, and cherished photographs too numerous for the house, was engulfed in flames. "No!" she exclaimed. The conflagration devoured the wooden structure with a ravenous crackle. Embers ascended into the night sky, drifting precariously towards the rear of her residence. "Tinker, fetch the hose," Big Red commanded, already hastening towards the shed. "Knuckles, return here immediately." Stitch's motorcycle roared into the driveway at that precise moment. He dismounted, taking in the scene. In an instant, he seized a garden hose coiled near the rear veranda and turned the valve to its maximum flow. The motorcyclists operated with practiced proficiency. Stitch directed the hose towards the base of the inferno, while Big Red and Knuckles employed shovels from Evelyn's garden to cast earth upon the blaze. Tinker positioned himself between the shed and the house, repelling any sparks that drifted too close with a damp cloth he had procured. Evelyn remained immobile on her back porch, observing as her world was consumed by fire. The shed contained a multitude of mementos: her late husband's fishing equipment, her grandchildren's artwork from their formative years, albums filled with photographs she had intended to bring indoors. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing nearer. The motorcyclists battled the flames with grim resolve. Water hissed against the fire. Steam and smoke billowed into the nocturnal expanse. Gradually, the orange glow subsided, yielding to smoldering remnants and the acrid odor of burnt timber. The blaze was contained before it could reach her dwelling, but the shed was obliterated. All within it, gone. A part of Evelyn fractured. After days of maintaining her composure, of resisting, of exhibiting bravery, this ultimate transgression proved too much. Her knees gave way, and she sank onto the porch steps, tears streaming freely down her lined visage. "Why?" she sobbed, her slender shoulders convulsing. "Why are they inflicting this upon me?" Big Red was by her side in an instant, his substantial arm encircling her shoulders, a gesture of surprising gentleness. "Because they are craven," he stated, his voice rough with emotion. "Because you instilled fear in them by confronting them. Because they believe they can compel you to capitulate." Flashing lights illuminated the front of the residence as police vehicles arrived. Knuckles went to meet them, explaining the circumstances. "I cannot endure this any longer," Evelyn murmured, her voice barely audible above the din. "I merely desired a life of tranquility." "Miss Evelyn," Big Red declared, meeting her tear-filled gaze directly, "we shall not depart from your side again, not for a single moment." Stitch approached, his expression somber beneath his bandana. "The authorities require statements. They are classifying this as arson." The ensuing hour passed in a daze. Police documented photographs and recorded statements. Fire department personnel confirmed the complete extinguishment of the blaze. Neighbors congregated on the street, observing. By 2:30 in the morning, the officials had finally departed. The fractured window was covered with a sheet of plywood that Tinker had discovered in his vehicle. The shed stood as a blackened effigy against the night sky. Evelyn lay on her sofa, enveloped in a quilt, too apprehensive to sleep in her bedroom. Her eyes were red from weeping, her body fatigued, but her mind raced. Outside, Big Red sat astride his motorcycle beneath a street lamp. The engine was off, but his presence was undeniable, a sentinel maintaining vigil. Knuckles was stationed at her rear entrance, while Stitch and Tinker patrolled the boundary of her property. Through her temporary window covering, Evelyn could discern Big Red's silhouette, steadfast, unyielding, protective. She closed her eyes, finding a small measure of solace in the knowledge that she was not alone. The night stretched on, quiet, yet no longer peaceful. Friday morning dawned with stark clarity. The sunrise cast an unforgiving illumination upon Evelyn's backyard, revealing the full extent of the destruction. What had once been her cherished garden shed was now a charred carcass, blackened beams pointing accusingly towards the heavens. Piles of ash and debris marked the former repository of cherished memories. Evelyn stood on her back porch, a mug of untouched tea cooling in her hands. She had not slept for more than an hour throughout the entire night. Her eyes were swollen, her shoulders burdened by exhaustion and sorrow. Miss Evelyn. Stitch appeared beside her, his typically gruff tone softened. You ought to consume something. I prepared some toast. She nodded absently, her gaze fixed upon the devastation. That shed housed all my husband's fishing gear. His favorite hat was in there, along with my grandchildren's inaugural drawings. Her voice faltered. Stitch placed a steady hand on her shoulder. I am profoundly sorry. Movement at the fence line drew their attention. Mrs. Geraldine Parker, Evelyn's neighbor for 15 years, stood at the gate, her face etched with concern. Behind her, several other neighbors had gathered. Evelyn, good heavens, what transpired? Mrs. Parker called out, pushing open the gate without awaiting a response. She hurried across the yard, disregarding Stitch's imposing presence beside Evelyn. Soon, Evelyn's backyard teemed with neighbors. Mr. Ruiz from across the street, the Torres family from 2 doors down. Elderly couples who had resided in the neighborhood for as long as Evelyn herself, young families who had relocated more recently. We heard the sirens last night, Mrs. Parker stated, her arm around Evelyn's shoulders. Then Mary Thompson telephoned, announcing, there was a fire at your residence. Someone perpetrated this deliberately, Mr. Ruiz declared, examining the remains of the shed with discerning eyes. He had been employed as a contractor prior to his retirement. This was not an accident. Evelyn nodded, too weary to withhold the truth any longer. It is because I lodged a complaint against the police and the bank. The words hung in the morning air. Then something unexpected occurred. Instead of withdrawing, her neighbors drew closer. What complaint? Inquired Mrs. Torres, her accent thickening with indignation. What did they perpetrate against you? The narrative spilled from Evelyn. The mortifying detention at the bank, the discriminatory treatment, the subsequent harassment. As she spoke, more neighbors arrived, passing through the gate and joining the expanding circle surrounding her. The motorcyclists remained respectfully at a distance, permitting this communal moment to unfold. That officer, Maddox, arrested my son last year for merely sitting in his vehicle, stated Mr. Washington, an elderly gentleman who rarely spoke at neighborhood assemblies. Said he appeared suspicious. The lad was simply awaiting his girlfriend to conclude her shift at the grocery store. The bank declined my loan application on 3 occasions, added Mr. Torres. No justification offered. My credit is impeccable. But Frank Dillard, he invariably proffers excuses. One by one, similar accounts emerged. What had commenced as neighbors checking on Evelyn evolved into an impromptu community forum. Big Red observed from the porch steps, a rare smile creasing his weathered countenance. A stout, fair-haired gentleman pushed through the throng. Ed Ramsey, who had retired from the Stonebrook Police Department 5 years prior. Miss Bird, he stated, removing his cap. I worked alongside Maddox for 3 years before my retirement. That individual has had 7 complaints filed against him, all of them suppressed. His gaze was steady and apologetic. I should have voiced my concern sooner, but I am speaking now, and I shall document it for you. Reverend Jackson from Evelyn's church arrived, his tall frame parting the crowd like Moses at the Red Sea. Evelyn, he declared, clasping her hands in his, this cannot persist, not in our community, not against one of our elders. He surveyed the assembled neighbors. Church hall, 6 o'clock this evening. We must organize. A murmur of assent swept through the gathering. As the neighbors dispersed with assurances of their return that evening, Mrs. Parker remained behind, assisting Evelyn indoors to rest before the assembly. The motorcyclists continued their protective watch, rotating shifts to ensure continuous presence. You realize, Big Red commented as Evelyn settled onto her sofa for a nap, I believe we underestimated this neighborhood. Evelyn offered a weary smile. The individuals here have endured quiet struggles their entire lives. They comprehend when the opportune moment arrives to speak out. The community hall of Greater Hope Baptist Church buzzed with voices that evening. Every pew was occupied by individuals standing along the walls and spilling into the vestibule. Evelyn sat in the front row beside Samuel Given, who had arrived early to make preparations. The Hells Angels entered as a cohesive unit, their leather vests and tattoos presenting a stark contrast to the formal attire many church members wore. A moment of silence ensued. Then, Reverend Jackson welcomed them warmly, directing them to seats in the rear. Brothers and sisters, the Reverend commenced once everyone had settled. We are convened tonight because one of our own has been wronged. But as we have learned, Sister Evelyn's experience is not unique. He invited Evelyn to speak first. She stood slowly, her cane steady against the floor, and faced her community. The words flowed more readily this time, bolstered by the supportive nods and murmurs of agreement from the congregation. When she concluded, others rose to speak. A young Latino gentleman described being shadowed through stores by Officer Harlan. An elderly woman explained how Frank Dillard had questioned the origin of her pension checks when she attempted to deposit them. A teenage boy recounted being stopped and searched by Officer Maddox while walking home from basketball practice. The narratives persisted for over an hour. Samuel Given meticulously recorded notes, occasionally posing clarifying inquiries. The visages of the community members reflected anger, pain, and most importantly, resolve. Finally, Samuel stood to address the gathering. What we are witnessing here is a pattern, he articulated, his voice carrying easily throughout the hall. Not isolated incidents, but systematic mistreatment of this community. Mrs. Bird's case provides us with a starting point, but each of your testimonies strengthens our position. He surveyed the room. I require volunteers to provide formal statements. With sufficient evidence, we can advocate for a broader inquiry. Hands shot up across the room. Samuel's assistant moved through the assembly, collecting contact details from those willing to testify. This will not be swift or uncomplicated, Samuel cautioned. The system protects its own, but collectively, with a unified voice, we can demand accountability. From the rear of the hall, Big Red stood. His colossal frame drew all eyes. The angels shall provide security for anyone who feels vulnerable after coming forward, he announced. No one shall again transgress upon this community. A ripple of approval moved through the throng. Reverend Jackson beckoned Evelyn forward once more. She made her way deliberately to the altar, where she had sung in the choir for decades and assisted in distributing communion to generations of worshippers. She gazed out at the sea of faces. Black families who had resided in Stonebrook for generations, Latino immigrants who had more recently made it their home, the leather-clad motorcyclists who had become unexpected allies, and even a few white residents from the more affluent part of town who had come in solidarity. I was apprehensive, Evelyn confessed, her voice steady despite her fatigue. When they placed those restraints upon me, I felt so insignificant. When they defaced my home, I wished to surrender. She straightened her shoulders. But I am not insignificant. We are not insignificant. United, we are formidable. A chorus of amen rose from the congregation. Miss Evelyn shall not stand alone, Reverend Jackson proclaimed, taking her hand. Who stands with her? The entire room rose as one, a forest of raised hands and determined expressions. For the first time since the nightmare commenced, Evelyn felt the burden lifting from her shoulders. The path ahead would not be uncomplicated, but she would not traverse it in isolation. The community that had quietly persevered for so long had discovered its voice and its fortitude. Saturday morning arrived with Evelyn's window freshly repaired. The glazing company had arrived early, working expeditiously to replace what the projectile had shattered. Now her living room was transformed into an improvised command center. Samuel Given spread files across her dining table, his suit jacket draped over a chair. 3 laptops hummed, surrounded by stacks of legal pads and folders. Evelyn sat in her armchair, a cup of tea cooling beside her as she observed the activity with quiet resolve. The motorcyclists had arrived promptly at 8, filing in respectfully and occupying positions around the room. Big Red stood near the window, occasionally glancing outside at the tranquil street. Knuckles sat cross-legged on the floor, organizing printed testimonies into neat piles. Stitch had brought coffee and pastries for everyone, now arranged on the kitchen counter. The timing is critical, Samuel explained, gesturing to a calendar. We shall submit the civil rights lawsuit on Monday morning. That affords us the weekend to finalize all preparations. Evelyn nodded, her posture straighter than it had been all week. What is required of me today, Mr. Given? Your formal statement, recorded and notarized. He indicated a small video camera set up on a tripod. Every detail you can recall from the moment you entered that bank until now. Tinker approached with his laptop. I have the helmet camera footage ready for transfer. You will be astonished by its clarity. He turned the screen towards Samuel, who emitted a low whistle. Perfect angle of the apprehension, Samuel murmured, adjusting his spectacles. It clearly depicts the excessive force. Mrs. Parker arrived with a platter of sandwiches, slipping in through the rear entrance as naturally as if she resided there. She had appointed herself Evelyn's unofficial caregiver since the fire. You must eat, she told Evelyn firmly. One cannot contend with City Hall on an empty stomach. Samuel's assistant, a young woman named Janelle, began setting up a makeshift recording station in a corner of the living room. Mrs. Bird, whenever you are prepared, we shall commence your statement. Evelyn smoothed her dress and drew a deep breath. I am ready now. The room quieted as Janelle positioned the camera. Samuel sat opposite Evelyn with a legal pad. Kindly state your name and address for the record, he began gently. Evelyn Marie Bird, 142 Maple Street, Stonebrook. Mrs. Bird, please recount in your own words what transpired last Friday at Stonebrook Federal Bank. Evelyn's voice remained steady as she detailed every aspect. The suspicious glances from Ryan Keller, Frank Dillard's dismissive demeanor, the rough handling by officers Maddox and Harlan. She described the discomfort of the handcuffs, the humiliation of being escorted out in view of everyone. And since that day, what has occurred? Samuel prompted. She elaborated on the vandalism, the fire, the threats. As she spoke, her voice gained strength. The motorcyclists listened in silence, their expressions hardening with each new revelation. Thank you, Mrs. Bird, Samuel stated when she concluded. Your testimony is compelling and clear. A knock at the door interrupted them. Big Red moved to answer it, one hand hovering near his belt. Ed Ramsey stood on the porch with a thick manila envelope. I have brought what I promised, he said, stepping inside. Personnel records I retained copies of before my retirement. They illustrate the pattern of complaints against Maddox dating back 5 years. Samuel accepted the envelope with raised eyebrows. This could prove to be crucial evidence. Mr. Ramsey should have provided it years ago, Ed stated gruffly. Better late than never. Throughout the morning, a consistent stream of neighbors arrived. Some to provide statements, others to drop off sustenance or simply to check on Evelyn. Janelle meticulously recorded each testimony, while Knuckles and Stitch assisted elderly neighbors in completing written statement forms. Mr. Tarn Torres brought his teenage son Miguel to translate for Spanish-speaking residents who wished to contribute their experiences. The young man worked diligently, carefully converting their words into precise English for Samuel's records. "We are constructing more than a legal case," Samuel observed quietly to Evelyn. "We are documenting a community struggle." Around noon, Tinker burst through the front door, his face flushed. "They are making overtures," he announced. "Frank Dillard is at the Wilsons' residence further down the street." Samuel frowned. "The Wilsons provided statements last night. He is attempting to coerce them into retracting them," Tinker confirmed, offering to review their mortgage situation if they clarify their previous statements. Big Red started towards the door, but Evelyn raised her hand. "Wait, let me contact Reverend Jackson first." Within 20 minutes, 5 church elders had assembled outside the Wilsons' home. They remained silent, merely standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, observing. Frank Dillard emerged shortly thereafter, his face flushed with vexation. He entered his Mercedes and sped away. Meanwhile, across town, Officer Maddox was encountering his own difficulties. He had approached Marisol Rivera at the grocery store, cornering her near the produce section. "You ought to consider carefully the ramifications of providing false information about a bank manager," he told her, standing excessively close. Immigration authorities scrutinize everyone these days. However, he had failed to notice the 3 Hells Angels members who had been tailing him since morning. Stitch stepped forward, phone recording. "Problem, officer?" he inquired loudly, drawing the attention of other shoppers. Maddox retreated, muttering about routine inquiries. By mid-afternoon, the news had disseminated throughout Stonebrook's neighborhoods. Anyone approached by law enforcement or bank officials was instructed to call a designated number immediately. The community had forged a robust protective alliance. Harvey Collins, a veteran of the Vietnam War residing just a few houses away from Evelyn, positioned his pickup truck directly before her residence, resolutely refusing to relocate. "I'm taking the initial vigil," he declared, clutching a thermos filled with coffee. "Sir, we've got this secured," Knuckles reassured him. "No disrespect intended to you fellows," Harvey responded, settling into his driver's seat. "But I've been keeping watch over this entire street since before any of you were even a thought." Inside, Samuel and Janelle continued their meticulous work, documenting all statements. Tinker had duplicated the helmet camera footage onto numerous flash drives and secured it in various cloud storage accounts for safekeeping. "We must prepare for the media influx," Samuel advised Evelyn. "Once we submit our filings on Monday, the press will be all over this. Are you braced for that?" Evelyn pondered the query. Just a week prior, the notion would have filled her with dread. Now, she affirmed with a decisive nod. "If recounting my experience can empower others, then yes, I am ready." As twilight descended, the gathered crowd gradually began to disperse. Samuel carefully packed his case files, making a promise to return on Sunday afternoon to finalize all arrangements. The motorcyclists initiated their established rotation, with Big Red undertaking the first overnight security detail. Evelyn moved through her home, tidying cushions and washing teacups, her actions deliberate and remarkably composed. The apprehension that had crippled her earlier in the week had transmogrified into something distinct, a quiet fortitude that steadied her hands and reinforced her posture. In her private chamber, she retrieved a framed photograph from her dressing table. James Bird's smiling visage gazed back at her, his army uniform impeccably pressed, his expression one of profound pride. Her husband had been absent for 15 years now, yet she still engaged him in conversation each night. She positioned the photograph on her bedside table, angling it so that his likeness was bathed in the warm glow of the lamp. "We are fighting back, James," she murmured, her fingertip tracing the edge of the frame. "I no longer harbor any fear." From outside, she could detect the deep thrum of Big Red's motorcycle as he patrolled the perimeter. Within, the house felt fundamentally altered, not solely due to the day's events, but because a profound internal shift had occurred. For the first time in many years, Evelyn's dwelling was no longer merely a sanctuary of memories and quiet routines. It had been transformed into a bastion of defiance. Monday morning dawned with a gentle, cleansing rain, as if the town itself was being prepared for the momentous events about to unfold. Evelyn stood before her vanity mirror, carefully securing her silver hair. She had selected her most elegant attire, a navy blue dress adorned with white trim, and her favorite footwear, despite their tendency to pinch. Her hands exhibited a slight tremor, yet it was not from fear. This was the day she had long anticipated. A growing chorus of motorcycle engines grew louder beyond her window. Through the drapes, she could discern the members of the Hells Angels arriving sequentially, meticulously arranging their bikes in a precise formation along the roadside. Today, they had eschewed their typical leather vests in favor of immaculately clean black leather jackets, their motorcycles gleaming after a thorough polishing. The doorbell chimed. Mrs. Parker stood on the threshold, attired in her finest Sunday attire. "Ready to make history, Evelyn?" she inquired with a warm smile. Evelyn nodded, collecting her handbag. More than ready. Outside, the street had undergone a remarkable transformation. At least 30 individuals were assembled: church parishioners, neighbors, and former patrons from the cafeteria where Evelyn had dedicated decades of her professional life. Ed Ramsey stood beside his retired police cruiser, now a civilian vehicle, yet still exuding an aura of authority. Harvey Collins, accompanied by 3 other veterans, formed a relaxed honor guard. Big Red approached, extending his arm with formal grace. "Your conveyance awaits, Miss Evelyn." Instead of motorcycles, the bikers had arranged for a sleek black SUV. "We can't have you getting damp today," Knuckles explained, opening the passenger door. The procession to the courthouse was an unprecedented spectacle for Stonebrook. The SUV led the way, followed by a phalanx of motorcycles, and then a continuous line of automobiles extending for several blocks. As they navigated through the town, onlookers emerged from shops to observe the remarkable sight. Some offered waves, while others simply stared in silent contemplation. At the courthouse steps, the rain had diminished to a mere drizzle. Samuel Given awaited at the entrance, his briefcase in hand, his demeanor calm yet resolute. Beside him stood Janelle, clutching a substantial stack of folders. "Quite the dramatic entrance, Mrs. Bird," Samuel commented with a smile. "Are you prepared?" "I have been ready my entire life," Evelyn replied, straightening her posture. The motorcyclists formed an escort, flanking her as they ascended the courthouse steps. The assembled community supporters created a protective corridor behind them. Photographers from the local newspaper busily captured images, and Evelyn observed a television news van parked directly across the street. The polished marble hallways of the county courthouse resonated with the sound of their footsteps. In contrast to the police station or the bank, this venue possessed a profound solemnity, almost a sacred aura, imbued with the promise of justice. Evelyn had never previously set foot inside a courtroom. Courtroom number 3 was already beginning to fill with eager spectators. Frank Dillard occupied a seat at the defense table alongside the bank's legal representative, a woman with sharp features and an expensive suit.
Officer Maddox and Officer Harland were seated at an adjacent table with the police department's legal counsel, a balding gentleman who frequently consulted his timepiece. Evelyn took her place beside Samuel at the plaintiff's table. The motorcyclists and community members filled the gallery behind them, forming an imposing bastion of solidarity that clearly unsettled Maddox. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge William Thornton presiding." Judge Thornton, an elderly Caucasian gentleman with keen eyes, was known for his impartiality. He surveyed the crowded chamber with a slight furrow in his brow. "I observe we have a considerable assembly today," he remarked. "Let me be unequivocally clear. I expect order in my courtroom. This is not a sporting event." He briefly reviewed the case file. Bird versus Stonebrook Federal Bank and Stonebrook Police Department. "Counsel, are you prepared to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," replied Samuel Rose. The defense attorneys confirmed their readiness. "Mr. Given, please present your opening statement," the judge directed. Samuel approached the center of the courtroom, his posture erect, his voice clear and measured. "Your Honor, this case transcends a singular occurrence or individual. It represents a persistent pattern of conduct that has been allowed to fester within our community." He continued, "Mrs. Evelyn Bird, a respected 74-year-old grandmother and lifelong resident of Stonebrook, visited her bank to withdraw funds for her granddaughter's university education. What should have been a straightforward transaction devolved into a harrowing ordeal of discrimination, an unjust arrest, and subsequent acts of reprisal." Samuel systematically articulated the charges: racial prejudice at the bank, false imprisonment by law enforcement, elder mistreatment, intimidation, and financial hardship. He elucidated how each accusation was substantiated by robust evidence, including video recordings, audio documentation, and multiple witness accounts. "We shall demonstrate," he declared, "that not only was Mrs. Bird subjected to undue hardship, but that this mistreatment was indicative of a pervasive pattern of systemic discrimination that has impacted numerous individuals within our community. We seek not merely compensation for Mrs. Bird, but accountability and fundamental structural reforms to preclude such abuses from recurring." The bank's attorney, Ms. Hartwell, countered by emphasizing standard security protocols and the principle of reasonable suspicion. The police department's counsel, Mr. Donovan, underscored the split-second decisions officers must make in potentially volatile circumstances. Judge Thornton listened impassively before addressing Samuel. "Call your first witness." The plaintiff calls Mrs. Evelyn Bird. Evelyn proceeded to the witness stand with dignified steps, placed her hand upon the Bible, and took the oath to testify truthfully. From this elevated vantage point, she could observe every individual present in the courtroom: the stern judge, the apprehensive defendants, and the rows of supportive individuals arrayed behind her. Samuel skillfully guided her through her testimony, ensuring both gentleness and thoroughness. Evelyn recounted the events at the bank in vivid detail: the suspicious gazes, the hushed telephone conversation, the arrival of the police, and the profound humiliation of being handcuffed. "And what transpired after your release?" Samuel inquired. "They commenced their harassment," Evelyn responded, her voice steady. "My mailbox was vandalized. My porch was egged. They imposed a freeze on my bank account." Her voice faltered momentarily. "Then, my shed was set ablaze. A note was left, instructing me to abandon the case." The judge's expression darkened. "Do you possess evidence linking these actions to the defendants?" "Yes, Your Honor," Samuel interjected. "We shall present that evidence shortly." Following Evelyn's testimony, Samuel called Marisol Rivera to the stand. The young bank teller approached with evident nervousness, her gaze flickering towards Frank Dillard, who was openly scowling at her. "Ms. Rivera, kindly recount for the court what you observed at Stonebrook Federal Bank on the day in question," Samuel prompted. Marisol took a deep, fortifying breath. Mr. Dillard, the manager. He immediately made a disapproving face upon seeing Mrs. Bird. When the teller contacted him regarding the withdrawal, he remarked, "Why does one of these welfare grannies need that kind of cash?" Then he instructed Ryan to contact the police, suggesting these individuals were likely engaged in some form of illicit scheme. "Objection," Miss Hartwell declared, rising to her feet. "Hearsay."
Your Honor, Samuel countered. Miss Rivera was present and directly overheard these statements as an employee. Overruled, the judge decided. Proceed. Miss Rivera elaborated on how Frank had uttered comparable remarks about other African-American patrons, particularly those making substantial withdrawals. "He told us to always scrutinize their identification," she stated, but he never applied such scrutiny to Caucasian customers. Next, the video evidence was presented. Samuel played the helmet camera footage captured by Tinker's motorcycle, offering a clear perspective of the arrest. The courtroom fell into a hushed silence as they observed Officers Maddox and Haron roughly handcuffing Evelyn, disregarding her explanations and escorting her toward the patrol car. Frank Dillard was subsequently called to the witness stand. Under Samuel's cross-examination, he became increasingly defensive, contradicting his prior assertions regarding security concerns. When pressed about his differential treatment of customers, he retorted, "Some individuals inherently raise more red flags than others." "And what specific flags did Mrs. Bird raise?" Samuel inquired. Frank hesitated. "It was merely a feeling." "A feeling predicated upon what?" Mr. Dillard stammered. "Experience," Frank stated stiffly. "Experience with elderly black women specifically." By the time Officer Maddox took the stand, the tension within the courtroom was palpable. Samuel methodically questioned him regarding his actions that day, contrasting them with established police procedures. When confronted with the evidence of retaliatory behavior, Maddox's composure fractured. "Look, we have protocols for suspicious activity. They may not appear aesthetically pleasing on camera, but I was performing my duty." "And was it also your duty to repeatedly drive past Mrs. Bird's residence to issue spurious citations?" Samuel pressed. "I patrol where I am needed," Maddox snapped. "And some neighborhoods require more attention than others." "Neighborhoods like Mrs. Bird's?" Samuel asked quietly. "Those people," Maddox began, then caught himself. "That area has experienced issues." "What people, Officer Maddox?" Samuel inquired, his voice perfectly serene. Maddox's face contorted. "I did not intend any malice by that remark." The proceedings continued with witness after witness. Community members recounted similar experiences. Former officers spoke of the department's informal policies. Banking specialists confirmed that Mrs. Bird's transaction should never have aroused suspicion. As the afternoon progressed, even Judge Thornton's usually impassive demeanor began to betray signs of concern. He interjected periodically with pointed questions, suggesting he was disturbed by the emerging pattern. By 4 o'clock, both legal teams had concluded their presentations. Samuel's closing argument was concise yet impactful, emphasizing not only the detriment inflicted upon Evelyn, but also the broader ramifications for the entire community. "Your Honor," he concluded, "what transpired with Mrs. Bird was neither an error nor a misinterpretation. It was the inevitable consequence of systemic prejudice that has been permitted to operate without restraint. We request not merely damages, but accountability and transformative change." Judge Thornton removed his spectacles, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The courtroom was enveloped in a hushed anticipation. "I have heard considerable testimony today that necessitates careful deliberation," he announced finally. "I will render my decision tomorrow morning. All parties are to return to this courtroom promptly at 9 o'clock in the morning," he declared, striking his gavel. "Court is adjourned." As the attendees began to depart, Evelyn remained seated, her hands clasped in her lap. She felt an unexpected sense of peace, as though a significant burden had been lifted from her shoulders. Regardless of the outcome tomorrow, she had articulated her truth in a venue where it had to be heard. Big Red approached, offering his arm. "You conducted yourself admirably, Miss Evelyn, exceptionally well." She smiled up at him, rising steadily to her feet. "We all did, Red. We all did." By 8:30 on Tuesday morning, the courthouse was already teeming with people. Individuals crowded onto the wooden benches, their hushed conversations filling the room with an atmosphere of nervous anticipation. Evelyn occupied the plaintiff's table, wearing her finest navy dress, the one she typically reserved for Easter Sunday. Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged her purse on her lap. Big Red, clad in a crisp button-down shirt that strained against his broad shoulders, sat beside her. His leather vest remained visible beneath, a testament to his refusal to completely shed his identity, even for court. Noticing Evelyn's trembling hands, he extended his palm. She placed her delicate hand within his formidable one and gripped it tightly. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "you've already triumphed by standing your ground." Evelyn nodded, unable to vocalize her response. After decades of deferring, of remaining unseen, of suppressing injustices with a polite smile, this moment felt almost surreal. The community filled the seats behind her, church members, neighbors, former colleagues from the school cafeteria, and, naturally, the motorcyclists who occupied the rear row like a formidable, leather-clad bulwark of support. Frank Dillard sat at the defense table, exuding an air of smugness, whispering to his attorney. Officer Maddox's jaw was clenched tightly, his gaze fixed forward, while Officer Harlan nervously adjusted his tie. Precisely at 9 o'clock, the bailiff called the court to order. "All rise for the Honorable Judge William Thornton." Everyone stood as Judge Thornton entered, his black robes flowing behind him. His countenance betrayed nothing as he settled into his chair and arranged his documents. "You may be seated," he stated, his voice resonating throughout the hushed courtroom. "After reviewing all testimony and evidence presented yesterday, I am prepared to deliver my ruling in the case of Byrd versus Stonebrook Federal Bank and the Stonebrook Police Department." The judge's gaze met Evelyn's directly, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Mrs. Byrd, I wish to commend you for your courage in bringing this matter before the court. It is not a simple undertaking to confront powerful institutions, particularly at your age." Evelyn straightened her posture, an aura of dignity radiating from her despite her evident nervousness. Judge Thornton continued, "This court has been presented with overwhelming evidence of discriminatory practices, abuses of authority, and retaliatory actions that have no legitimate place within our justice system or our community." Frank Dillard's self-satisfied expression began to falter. Maddox shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "The evidence clearly indicates that Mrs. Byrd was targeted due to her race, subjected to humiliation and physical distress during an unwarranted arrest, and subsequently endured calculated retaliation when she sought redress. The helmet camera footage alone provides irrefutable proof of the officer's misconduct. Furthermore, the testimony of bank employees confirmed a pattern of racial discrimination at Stonebrook Federal that is both alarming and unlawful." The judge paused, looking over his spectacles at the defendants. What is perhaps most concerning is not merely the initial incident, but the concerted effort to intimidate Mrs. Byrd into withdrawing her complaint, an effort that escalated to property damage and threats of violence. Evelyn's grip on Big Red's hand tightened. The room was utterly silent. "Therefore," Judge Thornton declared, "I am ruling in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. The court orders the following remedies," he stated, consulting his papers. "First, Stonebrook Federal Bank and the Stonebrook Police Department
are jointly ordered to compensate Mrs. Evelyn Bird with $1.5 million in compensatory damages for emotional distress, civil rights violations, and related losses. A collective intake of breath swept through the courtroom. Evelyn's free hand flew to her mouth.
Second, Frank Dillard is to be terminated from his position at Stonebrook Federal Bank, effective immediately, and barred from holding management positions in financial institutions for a period of no less than 7 years. Frank's face drained of all color. His attorney placed a restraining hand on his arm. Third, Officers Maddox and Harlan are suspended without pay pending a federal civil rights investigation into their conduct. I am recommending their permanent removal from the force. Maddox's face contorted with anger, but Harlan simply slumped in his seat, his gaze fixed on the table. Fourth, I am ordering a state-level inquiry into the practices of the Stonebrook Police Department, including a review of all complaints filed against its officers within the past 5 years. The police chief, seated in the gallery, closed his eyes briefly, his expression grave. Fifth, Stonebrook Federal Bank is fined $250,000 for discriminatory practices and ordered to implement anti-bias training for all employees, with the results to be reviewed quarterly by an independent monitor. The judge set down his papers and addressed the entire courtroom. Let this ruling serve as a reminder that justice is not a prerogative reserved for the powerful or the privileged. It belongs to every citizen, irrespective of age, race, or social standing. This court will not tolerate the abuse of authority or discrimination in any form. He struck his gavel firmly. So ordered. Court is adjourned. For a moment, the courtroom remained frozen in stunned silence. Then, as if a dam had burst, applause erupted. People rose to their feet, cheering and embracing one another. The motorcyclists in the rear, mindful of decorum, nodded approvingly, though Tinker let out a quiet "yes" under his breath. Tears streamed down Evelyn's cheeks. Big Red gently squeezed her hand, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Samuel turned to her with a broad smile, shaking her hand formally before succumbing to the emotion and embracing her. "We did it, Mrs. Bird," he said. "You did it." Evelyn could barely speak through her tears. All these years, she managed. All these years of keeping quiet. Big Red assisted her to her feet as reporters began to press forward, held back only by the bailiff. Frank Dillard stormed out of the courtroom, his attorney hurrying behind him. Officer Maddox stood rigid with fury, while Harlan appeared to have aged a decade in the last hour. "Let's get you outside," Big Red said protectively. "Take a breath of fresh air." The motorcyclists formed a loose honor guard, escorting Evelyn through the throng. People reached out to touch her shoulder, to offer their congratulations. Mrs. Geraldine Parker from next door embraced her, both women weeping together. As they emerged onto the courthouse steps, the bright morning sun felt profoundly symbolic. A new day indeed. Reporters clustered at the foot of the steps, cameras flashing. Evelyn paused, momentarily overwhelmed by the attention. "You don't have to speak to them if you don't wish to," Big Red assured her, but Evelyn straightened her shoulders. "No, I believe I should say something." Samuel stepped forward to address the press. "Mrs. Bird will make a brief statement. Please be respectful. She has undergone a long journey to reach this moment." The reporters fell silent as Evelyn approached the microphones that had been hastily assembled. Her loyal advocates formed a bulwark behind her, devoted congregants, familiar faces from the neighborhood, and the imposing figures of the bikers, positioned like unwavering guardians. "The courtroom was never a place I envisioned myself in," Evelyn commenced, her tone hushed yet resolute. "My sole ambition was to facilitate my granddaughter's pursuit of higher education. However, the moment those restraints clasped my wrists, a fundamental shift occurred within me. It wasn't merely my heart that fractured,
but rather the aspect of my being that had consistently adhered to silence. She inhaled deeply. This triumph is not exclusively mine. It belongs to every individual who has ever harbored fear when it came to voicing their truth. It's for every soul who was instructed to remain in their designated station. Her voice gained a newfound power. Today, the judicial system has declared, my rightful position is precisely here, standing as an equal before the law, deserving of profound deference and possessing the fortitude to insist upon it. The assembly behind her erupted once more in enthusiastic acclamation.
Big Red remained steadfastly by her flank, his silent bearing serving as a constant testament to the improbable coalition that had paved the way for this momentous occasion. Amidst the incessant flash of cameras and the clamor of journalist inquiries, Evelyn experienced a sense of liberation she hadn't felt for an extended period. The visible marks on her wrists had vanished long ago. Yet, it was only at this juncture that the more profound injury, the one inflicted by countless years of suppressed self-respect, began to mend. I trust you found that narrative engaging. Kindly bestow a like upon this presentation and initiate a subscription to ensure you do not overlook our forthcoming installment. In the interim, I have personally curated 2 additional narratives that I believe will resonate with you. I wish you an exceptional day.